Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Israel will halt military operations for 10 hours each day in parts of Gaza to allow aid to reach the enclave. Over 100 food trucks are headed into southern Gaza as aid groups warn of mass hunger spreading across the region. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen will meet US President Donald Trump today to finalise a trade deal aiming to end uncertainty for EU companies. Trump, in Scotland for golf and bilateral talks, praised von der Leyen as a highly respected leader. At least 21 people were killed in an attack on a church in eastern Congo by Islamic State-backed rebels, according to reports. The attack has shocked local communities, leading to outrage. Thailand and Cambodia have agreed to allow Malaysia to act as a mediator in their border conflict. Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Manet met Thai acting Prime Minister Thum Wai Chang Chai will arrive in Malaysia on Monday evening for talks, according to the Malaysian Foreign Minister. Russian air defense units downed 291 Ukrainian fixed-wing drones, along with 2 guided bombs and 3 projectiles, the defense ministry said on Sunday. The strikes were reported on the ministry's Telegram channel. Turkish President Erdogan has commended French President Emmanuel Macron's decision to recognise Palestine as a state, calling it a courageous step towards justice. This move has sparked controversy among Israeli and US leaders. Iran has executed 2 members of the banned Mujahideen-e-Khalq group for attacking civilian infrastructure. The death sentences were upheld by the Supreme Court despite criticism over a grossly unfair trial from Amnesty International. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un vowed that the country will achieve victory in anti-imperialist, anti-US battles. Marking the Korean War Armistice anniversary, Kim affirmed North Korea's commitment to building a strong country with a powerful military. Now we start in the Indo-Pacific, where Thailand and Cambodia have formally agreed to Malaysia's offer to mediate their ongoing border conflict. Malaysian Foreign Minister Mohammed Hassan has said both nations requested Kuala Lumpur to take the lead and opposed involvement from any other country. Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Manet and Thailand's acting Prime Minister Pham Chai will arrive in Malaysia on Monday evening for direct talks. This comes after Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim proposed a ceasefire, which was welcomed by US President Donald Trump. Despite these diplomatic moves, both sides continue to trade artillery fire across contested border zones on Sunday. The fighting, now in its 4th day, has killed more than 30 people, 13 of them civilians in Thailand and 8 in Cambodia, and forced over 200,000 people to flee from frontline areas. Regional and global attention is now focused on the Kuala Lumpur talks in hopes of halting Southeast Asia's deadliest border flare-up in over a decade. We're now joined by our guest this hour, Martin Sá Arias, who's a foreign affairs expert. He joins us live from Ecuador. Martin, thank you very much as always for coming on the channel and talking to us. Malaysia has been chosen as the country to mediate this conflict. Donald Trump has pitched himself for this, but why has Malaysia been chosen as the country to mediate this conflict?
I think Malaysia has been chosen because it has great relationships between these 2 countries, Cambodia and Thailand, and also it's geographically logic because Malaysia is close to both. It's a neighbor country and has, as I said, good relations with both, and it's trying to fix a long disputed area, which is the temple between these 2 countries, and right now they are trying to go into a ceasefire after these clashes.
Yes, you mentioned this temple here that has been crucial in this conflict, a disputed UNESCO heritage site. What more can you tell us about it, Martin?
This temple has been disputed for since 1961. Cambodia claims it is part of its national heritage, and actually, International Court of Justice gave the reason to Cambodia. But in the other hand, it also gave the reason to Thailand, saying that actually all of the area surrounding the temple belongs to Thailand. So this is like a mixed area, which the exact same area belongs to both countries, but in a different way. One is the temple, and the other one is the area surrounding. So because of this, we have been seeing a lot of violence the last week, 30 people dead. And right now, these countries are trying to get into a ceasefire through Thailand and through the support of Donald Trump.
What's been the humanitarian cost of this conflict so far, Martin? 200,000 people displaced and over 30 people killed. What can you tell us about what's going on the ground?
It's obviously a humanitarian disaster. The people that have been displaced, they had no other options after watching the threat to their lives. I think the international community needs to put pressure on this. And I think the meetings and the mediation should take care as soon as possible so we can mitigate the effect of a population being displaced, population being subject of death and injuries. So it needs to take place as soon as possible.
Yes, Martin, you are staying with us to discuss further updates. We will bring you all those news updates coming out of Southeast Asia as we get them. However, now over to Europe, where Russia has abruptly cancelled its annual Navy Day parade, citing unspecified security reasons. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said safety was the top concern, but offered no further details. The parade, traditionally held on the last Sunday of July, was expected to showcase warships and submarines in St. Petersburg. President Vladimir Putin, who revived Navy Day in 2017, did not attend in person, but released a video praising the bravery and heroism of Russian naval forces currently engaged in Ukraine. Putin said the Russian Navy is participating in July Storm, a massive set of Navy drills across the Baltic, Caspian, Arctic and Pacific, involving over 150 vessels and 15,000 troops. The parade's cancellation marks another reminder of growing concerns over internal security as Russia continues to face retaliatory strikes from Ukraine deep inside its own territory. We're once again joined by Martin Saar-Arias. Martin, this is going to be a morale downer for the Russian cause. However, it is currently taking part in this huge demonstration, participating in the July Storm. What can you tell us about Russia's naval capabilities?
So first of all, I would need to start by saying that this type of cancellations have never happened since Soviet times. So this is like a milestone for Russia's security. Even though the Kremlin has never blamed directly Ukraine, obviously they are afraid of the threat of Ukraine. And right now I think the Navy of Russia is not as strong as it was before after Ukraine showed their capabilities in destroying the Russian drones and force. Right now we're watching a symbolic win for Ukraine because in terms of symbolism, this is a huge and important parade, and the cancellation just shows how the Kremlin is concerned and is not as sure as before it is absolutely superior to the Ukrainian forces.
Yes, indeed. What more can you tell us about this event, what it means for Russia, and how they are doing with the backdrop of the obvious war going on? We know that Russia has sanctions on it from many Western countries and huge economic powers. However, putting these large parades and maritime and launching these large maritime drills, how does this show against Russia's economy?
So, as I said, these type of parades and events are part of the symbolic pride of the nation of of how the Kremlin shows to its population the strength of Russia, the power of Russia against its enemies. However, right now in these war times, we're watching a weakened army. The Russian army has been always showing superiority in nuclear weapons and in massive destruction weapons. However, right now we're watching that its army is not as strong as they portrayed before. Right now, as I said, after Ukrainian attacks showing the capability of Ukraine, Russia is trying to be more cautious and more taking care about how it deals the war. And right now it's also not a great time for Russian economy after being boycotted by Europe, by the US, and having a lot of sanctions. So it's not the best times for Russian economy and army.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Martin Saar Arias, for joining us on the programme. We now move over to the Middle East for our next story, where an explosion rocked southern Gaza on Sunday as video from Khan Yunis showed smoke rising into the sky. No details of any casualties have been released so far. The blast comes as Israel announced daily tactical pauses in military operations across 3 areas: Al-Mawasi, Deir al-Bala and Gaza City. From 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. local time, Israeli forces say they will suspend operations to facilitate humanitarian access. Additionally, secure routes for UN and humanitarian aid convoys have been designated from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. local time. Israel says no ground troops will operate in these zones. Meanwhile, UNAID chief Tom Fletcher says the United Nations will seize the opportunity created by Israel's announced pauses in fighting to reach those in urgent need across Gaza, with blasts still being reported in those parts of Gaza. Civilians remain skeptical. We are covering Israel's announced pause in Gaza. We're now joined by Madhav Nalapat, the editor of the Sunday Guardian. He joins us live from New Delhi. Professor Nalapat, there is no doubt that the humanitarian situation in Gaza is in a terrible, terrible state. However, these 10-hour pauses bring hope. However, some people are skeptical. Do you think that those people have the right to be so?
Look, I'd like to point out that when you play with dynamite, it sometimes has an unpleasant habit of exploding in your face. And unfortunately, the ruling power in Gaza, which is Hamas, has been playing with dynamite for a very long time. And now, I mean, I think my hypothesis would be that that there are now factions now that see the risk that continuing Hamas and government has for the terribly suffering population of Gaza. They are going through utter agony. They are going through the worst form of hell. And this is as a consequence of being ruled by a ruthless terror force, Hamas. So I think, in my view, this is a fight back against Hamas by the people of Gaza, by those people of Gaza who are not indoctrinated into Hamas's ideology of hatred and violence. And I think this is what is happening. And yes, I'm sorry, but they have a right to be skeptical. I don't think the situation is going to end anytime soon. And in the meantime, more and more innocent civilians, including women and children, are going to die. And this is so tragic. You're seeing images every day of what's happening in Gaza, starvation, death and malnutrition and so many terrible things. But the fact of the matter is, unfortunately, the Israeli government believes, I think quite correctly, that the attack on October 7, 2 years ago, was an existential attack. And therefore they're responding. I don't think they will stop responding until they can end this menace once and for all. Thank you.
Professor Nalapat, do you think that this pause to allow aid into the Gaza Strip comes out of genuine concern from Israel, or do you think it's due to the mounting pressure from Western governments and aid agencies about warning of this mass starvation in the region?
Look, I know the Jewish people, and they are people who have helped humanity in very many crises, and they are extraordinarily kind and generous people. So I mean, I'm not sure, not everybody there would be in that same situation, but the overwhelming majority of Jewish people are kind-hearted, and they do want the good things to happen to the rest of humanity. The problem is that Hamas, declared war on the state of Israel by that terror attack of October 7. And as a consequence, the government in Israel is now at war. And unfortunately, in war, I'm very sorry to say, no rules apply. The rules of war are no rules except one side or the other claiming victory. And that is it.
Apart from international law, of course, Professor Nalapat, which forbids the striking of hospitals and aid workers, all of which have been reported in Israel's war in Gaza. Another thing, we have also seen the fact that they're going to drop aid from these planes into Gaza. They're going to allow the United Nations to do this as well, and also there's people, the British government also has said that they're going to do the same. What are your thoughts about this new strategy that has now been approved by the Israeli government?
Well, I'd like to say that innocent people should not starve. They should not suffer. The only point is that that aid should not be flowing into the hands of Hamas. You've got to have a reliable organization on the ground that ensures that the aid flows to people really in need. Gaza has been given so much of aid over the last 10, 15 years, and much of that has gone into the hands of operators of Hamas. So I think that precaution needs to be taken, but given that, I think it's very important to ensure that enough aid goes to Gaza so that this terrible starvation and deprivation that we are seeing in that little territory, that strip of land, that strip of land which is now a hell on earth. I think it's time that is addressed, and I think it needs to be safely addressed. And frankly, the problem is Hamas. And I think the Hamas now understand they made a mistake by that attack, but it's too late now. They are at war. And as I said, in war, there is only one possible rule. And the rule is either you win or you lose. And I don't think the Netanyahu is interested in losing, in Israel losing. The Jewish people have suffered horribly, if you remember, in the previous century, and they're determined not to suffer again. And frankly, this attack resembled nothing so much as the horrible scenes of the Holocaust of the 20th century. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Professor Nalapat. You are staying with us to discuss more updates. Iran has executed Mehdi Hassini and Beirut's Ehsani-Eslamloo, members of the banned opposition group Mujahideen-e-Khalq, or otherwise known as the MEK, for attacking civilian infrastructure with homemade projectiles. The judiciary said the two were operational elements of MEK and were sentenced to death in September 2024, with the Supreme Court upholding the verdict and denying a retrial. The defendants were charged with Moharabe, which means waging war against God, destruction of public property, and membership in a terrorist organization aiming to disrupt national security. Amnesty International condemned the trial as grossly unfair, citing torture, forced confessions, and lack of legal representation. The MEK, once a militant group opposing the Shah and later the Islamic Republic, has been active in exile for decades. We are once again joined by Madhav Nalapat, who is the editor of the Sunday Guardian, to discuss this further. Professor Nalapat, What does this trial say about the legal system in Iran? These two have been sentenced to death for something which Amnesty International says was grossly unfair, that there was torture involved even. What does this say about possible opposition in Iran and what treatment that they will face?
Well, I'd like to say that it's very unfortunate that you have a system in Iran, a governance system, in which there is a very tight and, if I may say so, to some people, very cruel control. And the Mujahideen-e-Khalq, I think, is scenting blood. They know that the Iranian regime is becoming weak. You're seeing what's happening in Gaza. You're seeing what's happening in Lebanon and in Iran itself. So a lot of attacks have been there. So from that point of view, I think they're scenting an opportunity. And the fact that they're using crude homemade devices indicates that there's no external hand behind this. They see an opportunity finally in which the clerical regime is basically, under siege, and the clerical regime is vulnerable, and they're moving ahead as a consequence of that. So I think this kind of attack, regrettable though it is going to happen. As for what is happening in terms of the Iranian legal system, well, if you oppose the clerics, let's say you oppose supreme leader, well, if you go before the Iranian system, then you can do it in a very peaceful way, but I think that legal system is not going to treat you very kindly. So I'd like to point out that in India, for example, Ajmal Kasab, who was caught by a very brave constable, Constable Omble, who paid with his life for catching this man, and he was, were given. Everybody has been given a fair trial, if I may say so, whether it is terrorists, for example, in Kashmir, or whether it is others, they've been given a fair trial. But then India is a democracy, and I don't think Iran can qualify as a democracy. It's very sad for the people of Iran. They have a very noble civilization and culture, and I think personally they're extremely unhappy with the clerical regime, but unfortunately they are still stuck with that. So in my personal view, I think the Mujahideen-e-Khalq, which is definitely a terror organization in the sense that it uses violence and terror to achieve its ends, definitely a terror organization, is now sensing an opportunity and moving in for the kill, regrettably the kill of so many innocent people as well.
Yes. Professor Madhav Nalapat, thank you very much for joining us on the programme. Now let's move over to Africa, where at least 21 people have been killed in a brutal overnight attack on a Catholic church premises in Komanda in the Ituri province of the Democratic Republic of Congo. The Islamic State-backed allied democratic forces are being blamed for the assault. According to a local civil society leader, victims were shot both inside and outside of the church, with several homes and shops also set ablaze. Authorities say at least 3 charred bodies have been recovered, though the search for more victims is still ongoing. A spokesperson for the Congolese army confirmed 10 deaths and described the attackers as armed men wielding machetes. The ADF, which pledged the allegiance to ISIS in 2019, continues its reign of terror across eastern Congo. Calls are growing for urgent military intervention as fear and displacement once again grip the region. We're once again joined by Martin Sá Arias, who's a foreign affairs expert, joining us live from Ecuador to discuss this further. Martin, what more can you tell us about this tragic incident coming out of the DRC today?
Unfortunately, this is the outcome of an ongoing war since the 1980s. This terrible organization has migrated to eastern Congo, a place which is already devastated by hunger and terrible climate change results. And this area is facing a terrible humanitarian crisis, not only hunger and poverty, but also this terrible terror organization that has been a rebel group fighting against the government. It's been aligned with ISIS, and it's basically an Islamic group that is trying to terrorize and spread by force its ideology in Congo. And the lack of a strong democratic system in Congo gives this outcome.
Yes, Martin Saar Arias, thank you very, very much for giving us a bit of context there on that situation. We will bring you all updates in regards to that situation coming out of the DRC. However, now let's take a look at some stories from South America. Argentine President Javier Milei has announced permanent reductions in export taxes on poultry, beef, soybeans, corn, sorghum and sunflowers, a key demand from the agricultural sector. Under the new policy, soybean export taxes dropped from 33% to 26%, corn and sorghum from 12% to 9.5%, and meat from 6.75% to 5%. Milei says these cuts are possible due to Argentina's fiscal surplus, which his government has safeguarded like water in the desert, despite political pressure. Colombia's foreign ministry has criticized Ecuador for deporting large numbers of Colombian citizens without a formal protocol, describing it as an unfriendly gesture, while Quito said the removals followed legal procedures and upheld human rights standards. Meanwhile, the Colombian government reported that authorities in the neighboring country had announced plans to deport Colombians currently imprisoned in various Ecuadorian penitentiaries. At least 18 people have died and 27 others were injured after a bus heading from Lima to Peru's Amazon region was overturned on a winding road in the Andes. The vehicle, carrying over 60 passengers, landed upside down near a river. The accident occurred near the city of Tama, around 240 kilometers from the capital. Emergency crews were present at the scene, while the cause remains under investigation. Bolivian political leader Ruth Nina, an ally of ex-President Evo Morales, has been transferred to a women's prison to serve 90 days of preventative detention. She's under investigation for saying the upcoming elections could bring deaths instead of votes if Morales isn't approved as a candidate. Morales' supporters have threatened mass mobilization if he's barred, though his party lacks legal status. His candidacy was rejected in June after a deadline passed. Over 5 years after the COVID-19 outbreak, Honduras has reinstated mandatory mask wearing in public spaces due to a surge in respiratory illnesses and a new virus variant. The health ministry confirmed 2 recent deaths, bringing this year's total to 6. Masks are now required in hospitals, schools, transport and other crowded places. State workers will temporarily shift to remote work. Authorities are also urging the public to complete vaccinations and follow hygiene measures as cases continue to rise. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world. Thank you.